Okay, so I'm going to try a little something new here. I was just thinking about Elder Gong's talk and just the importance of family and stories about family. And as you know, maybe I've been working for a while on a collection of essays that are in part about my life. And this one in particular that I want to share is about you, or revolves around you boys. And so it's not the first essay in that collection. I don't know where it will fall, but either way. Now, each essay revolves around a particular word. I pick a word, and then that word kind of plays a role in crafting the essay or the meaning of the essay. And so this particular essay revolves around the word wheels, which comes from the Old English, meaning to move round, to sojourn, to dwell, or revolve. And that last word, revolve, comes from the Latin revolvere, which means to turn or roll back, like time, to roll back time, or referring to the course or turning of celestial bodies, like in space, but also in the 15th century to the turning over in the mind and heart. And so while this essay is about wheels, in particular bicycles, it also weaves in different memories. And so it's my way of turning over in my mind and heart some of those memories and the meaning behind them. So here you go. Wheels. Not many years ago, I spent the better part of a cold Saturday afternoon in the middle of a cul-de-sac, turning in place, watching my four boys, ages 12, 10, 8, and 4 at the time, as they rode their bikes in and out of pockets of shadow and light, round and round and round, then around some more. All of them, to anyone watching from above, like little celestial bodies in a hastily made solar system model of which I was a part, and around which my whole life turned. My mind, too, went round and round, back and back, far, farther, farthest, to the moments and the lessons over which I taught each one of these boys to ride their bicycles, or bicycle, I should say, since they all learned on the same 12-inch velocipede. And then beyond, to when my father first taught me. Far. Okay, buddy, ready? I'll be right behind you, and I'll be holding on to the back of your seat. In this manner, my youngest learned to ride his bicycle, just like the three brothers before him, except to say he looked more like a linebacker on a miniature circus bike than a midget on a high-wheel penny farthing. Which comment about the disparity in size I share for no other reason than to make this point. Learning to balance, on account of how much girth he was carrying, required a little more practice than normal, meaning he crashed more, like a lot more, which in turn gave me ample opportunities to calm the wheezing and the sobbing and the cursing and the complaining and the blaming that followed most of those crashes. The first of which occurred just last year in the early evening light between the end of summer and the beginning of fall. Daddy, don't let go. I won't, son. Only when you're ready. Of course, when I gave him that assurance, I was aware that he thought that I meant that I would only let go after he had voiced his readiness, which thing he would not necessarily do on his own, being afraid to fall and all. When all along I intended to let go, according to my word, when I sensed he was ready. And isn't that how life is? We let go and we are let go of. Because that is how we learn and grow and begin to understand things, complex things like gravity and velocity and balance. And even though the process of learning these things sometimes leads to crashes and bruises and cuts, and even doubts about the seasoned hand that was steadying us from behind, there is no other way. And so, not long after my son kicked off the gravel driveway and got up to speed, I let go. And he pedaled, and he wobbled, and he kept pedaling, and he wobbled some more, and then he crashed. And I picked him up, and I dusted him off, and then I held him close, really close, while he wheezed and sobbed and cursed and complained, and "Daddy, you made me crash." Words are gifts, and every so often, as a parent, I find them given to me. This was one of those times. I opened my mouth, and there they were, wrapped up nicely, bow and all. "Son," I said, "there are 2 rules when learning to ride a bike. 1, you need to know that you will crash. It is just a matter of time. There's nothing I can do about it. That's just how it goes. And 2, when you do crash, you must not blame anyone else for that crash." To his credit, like a billion children before him, he got up and tried again. And then he crashed again. So he got back up again and crashed again, and then again and again and again. And every time he crashed, he hurt. And every time he hurt, I hurt. And the cuts across his little arms and legs were, for a short time anyway, a testament to his toughness and his perseverance and his faith and to letting go and being let go of. Until one time, he just kept pedaling. In pedaling, he picked up speed. With more speed, his wobbles steadied. And that quickly he became an expert rider of bicycles, with nary a memory of the painful process preceding perfection. And he has never really looked back, which is a good thing, because it is often when looking back that we lose our balance and fall. Speaking of balance, it wasn't until son number 3 that I finally decided to invest in and install a pair of training wheels, which marvelous invention he comfortably used for quite some time, because I could not always be there as often as he wanted to ride. But what he didn't know then was that those training wheels were rarely touching the pavement. I mean, at first they touched, sure. This helped him feel safe. But I didn't want him to get too comfortable with no tipping at all. So gradually, without him knowing, I raised those wheels. This way they would only ever touch as he leaned past a certain point. Because balance, you see, is not the absence of tipping. Rather, it is the ability to make small corrections when you do tip, which consequence of gravity is nothing to be ashamed of and certainly not worthy of freaking out over or yanking handlebars in this direction or that, or slamming feet onto the ground in an effort to gain control. Any one of which, while in motion at high speeds, is sure to send you hurling off the path into some nearby Douglas fir, by which you are likely to get the wind knocked out of you and then wheeze and sob and curse and complain and look for someone to blame. You will always find someone to blame if you look hard enough. But learning to ride a bike, which also means learning to fall from your bike, is as much about trust as it is mechanics. Farther. In the midst and mist of a typical Washington winter, my second son, who liked to pretend his bicycle was a horse, decided he could no longer wait for the sun and thus dragged me out to the wet concrete court, where he then proceeded to stand the bike upright from the puddle in which it lay and situate himself on the seat as if he intended to take off in that very moment, underdressed though he were in black cotton shorts and a light furry jacket which made him look like a little bear. "Okay, son," I said, filled anew with that deep-seated understanding of my responsibility in this iconic matter of bike riding 101. "I'll hang on to your seat," I began, "and then when you are ready, just let me know," and only to be cut off by these his painful words in short reply. "I don't need your help, Daddy." Push off, kick, 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 wobble, wobble, pedal, wobble, pedal, pedal, pedal. "I did it, Daddy." And he did. To my surprise, all by himself, without help, without me, his dad, the steady hand and the wise advice, whose job it was to teach him, and who, in that moment, was suddenly down one iconic moment, and with only 2 boys remaining at some unknown time in the future, which stark realization made me fiercely proud but also strangely sad, because how was I supposed to let go, I wondered, when I didn't even get the chance to first hang on tight. My son was there, and then he was not. And in that moment, behind my smile and shouts of encouragement as they carried after him across the concrete court and the lawn, and then finally down our long and rocky driveway, it was I who felt like doubling over to wheeze and sob and curse and complain and blame. Yes, above all, blame the inventor of the metallic hobby horse that was galloping my boy away from me. A few days later, I watched from afar through my home office window as he methodically scavenged the yard for bricks and sticks and boards with which to build a makeshift ramp. And then, upon completion, as he walked his bike to the top of a nearby hill and took off after that ramp with a zest and confidence that inspires me to this day. Had my wife been at that same window, she most certainly would have put a stop to it long before. But she was gone for the afternoon. So I let him go. Because I didn't get to before, I guess. Which is how he ended up separating from his bike midair, and then completing this amazing twisting triple sow-cow backflip thing, and finally landing on the ground with a thud that sent bolts of panic through my body. Rather than panic, though, and race down to his side to see if he was okay, which I wanted to do, but consciously chose not to for reasons I can't really explain, I hesitated, then cracked open the glass to casually inquire. In confirmation, he sat up, shook the fall and the fear and the foliage from his head, flashed a grin that to this day still makes me smile, and then took to the hill to try again. Farthest. My firstborn had the luxury of learning to ride on the newest form of that same bicycle. It wasn't out of the box new, but was instead purchased for $10 at the first sunny garage sale of the season, in a surge of premature excitement that actually predated him from even being able to touch the pedals by a good 2 or 3 years. Coincidentally enough, it was a similar premature excitement years before that led to another transaction, if you will, out of which my wife and I first got this child for whom the bicycle was acquired. In any case, when the time came on another first sunny day, the kind on which you can't help but feel invincible, we dusted the thing off, then wheeled it out from the garage. Both of us, I think, keenly aware of the moment's significance, that we were in that instant a part of a sacred tradition going back centuries, inextricably connected to fathers and sons across the globe, past, present, future. In the same manner that the first father helped the first son onto the first bike, so I was helping my son onto his. And in the same manner, I too smiled at his fears and gripped his seat and pushed him up and down the sidewalks and then up and down some more, all while his mother, who was the most nervous of all, watched from the porch. "Is his helmet on tight?" "Yes, honey." "And you're going to stay on the sidewalk, right?" "Right, honey." "And you won't let go of him?" "No, honey, I won't let go," I said, followed by, "Only when he is ready." With that multi-layered assurance, she stepped inside to check on his baby brother, which seemed to me as good a time as any. So when he got up to speed, I let go. Just a little at first, my fingers barely hovering off the surface of his seat, but then, bravely, a little more, and then a little more after that, and then leap of faith all the way. And the next thing I knew, I was standing upright, running behind him and then beside him, and he was riding his bike all by himself, and I was so proud. "And you're doing it, buddy, on your own. Look, no hands." That was a mistake. We don't typically like being on our own, or at least feeling like we are on our own. And in that moment, my oldest didn't like it either, which is why he panicked, which is why he stopped pedaling, which is why gravity took over and why he ended up on the ground in a pile of aluminum and plastic, wheezing and sobbing and cursing and complaining and blaming. And in his eyes, behind the tears, I could see all sorts of questions and doubts and fears. The same ones I saw in my wife's eyes not even a minute later as she ran from the house to comfort him, making it clear without a single word that she too was wondering just how it was even possible that her little boy could fall while I was holding on to the back of his seat as promised. Well, no, he didn't say he was ready, I wanted to explain, but he was ready, followed by, and after I let go, he was doing it all by himself. He really was. He just stopped pedaling. And then maybe, "Honey, I have to let go. There is no other way." But it was not the right time. I could see that. So I carried him inside, trying instead to calm with small talk his sadness and her frustration and my own alleged failure as a teacher of riding bicycles. Hey son, did you know the bicycle? When it was first invented, the French made a version out of wood? They did. And it rattled so much it was sometimes called a bone shaker. Speaking of, see this scar on my arm? Yeah? Well, when I was your age and learning to ride a bike, beyond. By George. That's what my dad said, muffled though it were by distance, a slight breeze and the sticky clop of his sneakers as he jogged down the path toward me. And then again, by George, as he pulled up beside me to assess the situation, then placed his large hand around the back of my 7-year-old neck and squeezed just so, in that ancient paternal way of expressing concern and love and understanding and respect and a host of other things when words are just not enough. Of course, it is only with hindsight that I recall these tender details because I was, at the time, still leaning over my bicycle, huffing and wheezing and sobbing and cursing the handlebar that had from the beginning been painted and padded enough to look cool, but not nearly enough to prevent the wind from getting knocked out of you, which is exactly what happened to me. Right after I lost control, that is, and then ran headlong into the weathered trunk of a grand fir growing just off the winding path. And then a third time, by George, as he lifted me over the red seat and the golden bars and sat me down beside him on this rocky bench of sorts and put his arm around me in that kind of one-armed side hug that dads are also naturally really good at, until my sobs subsided and he could, in what surely was a gentle but pointed sermon full of wise life lessons lost on me then, carefully address my fears, which I'm embarrassed to say came out in the form of complaints and blaming. Lessons about scientific things, maybe, like gravity and velocity and Newton's first law of motion, and life is sure full of winding paths and sudden drops, isn't it? And letting go, surely lots about letting go. Followed soon after, possibly, by life lessons as they related to mechanical things like pedaling and balance and revolutions and truing a wheel and checking for loose spokes. And sometimes we crash, son, but what really matters is, and if at first you don't succeed, son. And finally, did you know the Latin name for the tree that knocked you down? Obvious grande? The obvious means rising one. Now on your seat, kiddo, and let's give it another go, huh? That's how I like to imagine it anyway. But the reality is there are only 4 things about that moment that I can recall with any level of certainty. The panic I felt while losing control. The disabling fear after losing my breath. The worry that I had irreparably damaged my bike. And then, above all, my dad, with his by George and his large, seasoned hand around the back of my neck as we limped back to try again, side by side through shifting pockets of shadow and light as it shone through those resilient rising ones lining our path. All of which makes me imagine that the stairway to heaven is not actually stairs at all, but a long and winding path on which we pedal our bicycles in tandem with those we love. And then wonder if, quite possibly, the bicycle was invented earlier than the recorded 1817, but just never patented, like a lot earlier, perhaps by someone like, I don't know, say Carpenter Joseph. That unassuming stepfather to Jesus and redemption and resurrection. And if I can't teach him about life and death and love, honey, then maybe I can make something and teach him how to use that. Can you picture him? Tinkering away in his wood shop all morning, through the afternoon, and maybe into the night too, sawing and sanding and sanding and sanding. And then to give his son something to do after that whole temple incident, heaven help us, Mary. Finally emerging with this strange new rickety contraption over 2 wheels? And can you hear him then ask the boy what they should call it, only to have him answer without hesitation, "It's a bicycle, Dad," because he was that good with words from the beginning? And can you see that 12-year-old savior in training gird up his loins before hopping on and riding it through the marketplace, upturning tables like he would do decades later on a Saturday morning in his father's house, and then, just to look at the view or as a runway for some homemade ramp, maybe to the highest point of Golgotha, which place of the skull very much was a bone shaker, and where in the years to come he would call out to his dad for help when everything felt out of control, but only to be let go of when he was ready. Because in that moment, everything hung in the balance. And for the sake of all that had come, and for the sake of all that were yet to come, he had to learn of himself how to correct the wobbles, how to stay upright in the face of powerful forces trying to pull him down, how to catch his breath after losing it, and how to dig deep and wipe away the tears and withhold blame and dust himself off and find the strength, to find the desire, to muster the willpower to rise, rise, rise again. Which miraculous thing he would eventually do just 3 days after offering this final turn of phrase. Daddy, we did it. And they did. Because sometimes it takes just as much faith to let go as it does to be let go of. Not many years ago, I spent the better part of a cold Saturday afternoon in the middle of a cul-de-sac, turning in place, watching my 4 boys, ages 12, 10, 8, and 4 at the time, as they rode their bikes in and out of pockets of shadow and light, round and round and round, and then around some more, all of them to anyone watching from above, like little celestial bodies in a hastily made solar system model of which I was a part, and around which my whole life turned, and still does.